Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us today.
We wanted to spend some time this winter talking to farmers and seeing what unique things are going on around the state. So our first victim is Aaron Overholser. We're here in Darke County talking with him. He's graciously agreed to join us and share a little bit of what he does on his farm. So welcome, Aaron.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why don't you give us a little overview about your farm?
Sure. So like you said, my name's Aaron Overholser, and I farm with my parents and my wife between Bradford and Versailles. So we're like just east of Greenville in Darke County, Ohio. That's where our home farm is, but farm kind of straight east and west of Greenville, basically. So about 1,500 acres, a grain farm, corn and soybeans. No wheat anymore, and no livestock. So.
Yeah, so you guys have a pretty unique history here. Could you dive in a little bit to the history of your farm?
So my the home farm there where we operate was bought originally by my great grandma and grandpa on my mom's side, and would have been bought I think in 1947, and they had farmed in Springfield, Ohio, which is about an hour south by modern travel, I guess I should say. Mm-hmm. So the first year that they had purchased the farm where we live, they had been renting in Springfield, renting a farm and operating a small grain farm livestock operation. As you know, it would have been more diversified back then. And that first year, they actually farmed there in Springfield and then drove their equipment up and planted the farm that they had just purchased. So the first year, they actually farmed both. And my grandpa tells the story about his senior year in high school, driving the tractor and pulling like multiple wagons and having to get everything moved in time to get both planting and harvest done on both. But so that was kind of neat. So then after the first year, then they were done in Springfield, is my understanding, and just concentrated up here, and they moved up here basically because they found a farm that they could afford. Kind of hilly and a good place for cattle, and but so it's been good. So.
Yeah. That would be even a trek today.
Yeah.
With the road speeds we can drive
right.
on.
I think they might have even planted with their horses or mule or whatever. I think that first year. Wow. I don't know if how many tractors they had or whatever at the time, but yeah. So it's been kind of fun. And then the home farm. My great grandpa was a real hard worker, and so like he just kind of grew it. That was back in a time when if you were willing to work hard, you could just grow your farm. It wasn't maybe as capital intense as it is now, and there was more opportunities just for literally like if you sweat you can buy it, and so he was able to grow his base operation there and had all kinds of livestock, but yeah, so it's, and then my grandpa, which he would have been an only son, but had two sisters, he took over. My great grandpa actually died young. He was only I think he was 56, 58, somewhere in there, and he actually got cut working in, they had a chicken barn, like two laying barns, egg barns, and he got a cut and was allergic to penicillin and died like a week later. So my grandpa, he had a young family at the time, and he was only, 30 basically, and had to take over this farming operation. So with the help of his sister, and of course his mom, my great grandma, they were able to keep doing it. But
and then your grandpa was an early adopter of no-till.
Yeah. So my grandpa continued, with the livestock and everything that his dad had done. And I don't know. I think I remember hogs being on the farm until I remember looking out the window and watching the feed mixer go by. But I really was. I was 5-6 years old.
And you're in the millennial generation.
Yeah, so I think I'm 31. I was born in 88. Yeah, something like that. So I don't keep track of that as good as I used to. Yeah. So my dad had hogs. He was part of the hog operation back then, but they got out, about the time a lot of farms got out of having their own hogs on the farm, and they went to contract barns. They didn't make that step, but previous to the hogs, they'd had dairy cows and the laying barns, and just all kinds of stuff. Their hogs were fair to finish, but yeah. So my grandpa, when he was done with the manure and was kind of looking to do something different, he did adopt no-till pretty early on. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, I've never plowed a field, so but other than just for fun, we made a couple rounds to see what it was like. But, but our farm is kind of in a little bit of a hilly location, some of it, and we have some fields you wouldn't dare till. It would be all in the creek in just a matter of a few rains. So they used to do it, but now we know better. So yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you talk about some of the other equipment and technology that you think has made a difference in your operation over the years?
Yeah. So early on, my grandpa, like I say, was an early adopter of no-till farming. He also kind of subscribed, you might say, to a program that Ray Rawson had put together. He's a farmer out of Michigan that was kind of an early innovator in no-till, you might say strip-till, but so he had developed a tool, an inline ripper, and Ray Rawson was kind of one of the first ones to do that. And he called it the Zone Builder, which he later sold to Unterfirth, the patent or the technology on that, whatever. And that was kind of good that Grandpa found that, because as he came away from all the years of plowing and hard pan and potentially livestock grazing, whatever, that was a tool that we could use to eliminate compaction, but yet it didn't disturb the surface. Is kind of the principle behind it. So you pull it 12 inches deep or a little deeper if you can, whatever, and it kind of busts up like subsurface compaction, but doesn't disturb the surface. So that's one thing my grandpa got onto pretty early on, pulling it back with an old white four-wheel drive tractor that doesn't have as much horsepower as our front wheel assists do today. But and then also with the Ray Rawson program, they had a fertilize tool that went on your planter that was kind of like instead of a no-till coulter like we have today, it kind of did a little bit of strip-till on the toolbar. And it had 2x2 fertilize with an option for 2x2x2, which is something that's just come around like recently, right? But my grandpa didn't have the 2x2x2 one, but it was an option that you could put it on back then. But
yeah, and about what year?
Oh, this would have been, I don't even know. I mean, I was little. Yeah. I mean, like mid-90s probably.
Yeah, it's crazy how early some of these technologies come on and don't catch on at first.
Right,
they're the next big thing.
Yeah, so a lot of this stuff is, stuff we're just talking about. But yeah. And, when you're looking at, you go to the farm show and you look around, there's all kinds of technology that, like 3/4 of it probably isn't really going to work. Or, like you try, it's like, well, it doesn't fit our farm or whatever. But my grandpa had some good insight, like to kind of see, what would fit our hilly clay farm and but also work on our fields that are better, and so that's some of our early technology. I can talk more about
what you guys have gotten into, what you've been involved with.
So when my dad took over the farm around 2000, I believe it was, he had farmed with my grandpa up till then, but grandpa was ready to retire, and so that very first combine that my dad bought, without grandpa's input, I think we used it one season, and then I came home from school one day and they're working on it, and I was like, what's going on here? And they're putting a yield monitor on it. And of course, I'm like, what's a yield monitor? So you got a couple sensors, and it tells you what the yield is. So that first year was kind of fun just to watch it. Basically, we just had a number up on the screen, and I think the very next year then we started mapping that data. We had an old black and white display. This would have been like an aftermarket monitor in a John Deere combine, but so like a black and white display, and told you the numbers while you're driving. But if I was in there or Dad was in there and you didn't get to see the numbers, so it would record the data, and we could print maps, and so that's been kind of fun. So we have yield data all the way back since like I think about 2002.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you guys have been doing no-till for a while, and something that's kind of helped you probably with compaction, especially as we have this crazy weather, is the use of controlled traffic.
Yeah.
Gotten into that a little bit?
Yeah. So, back with the no-till thing, and before auto steer, we weren't really doing controlled traffic, I would say. I mean, we kind of did, but, how good can you really do it by hand?
Right.
But I think in around 2008, probably. We had purchased a newer John Deere tractor that was auto steer ready, and put the auto steer unit in it, and had it to where we could put it in the combine as well. And so that's kind of when we started the control traffic thing. Also, that we got to that point where our equipment kind of started to line up with implement widths, and that's something that we've tried to stick with. So we've been able to do the control traffic. We had an older auto steer unit, like just for spraying, that was just WAS. But when we put it in, actually to get serious about this control traffic thing and trying to do a good job recording data, it was pretty obvious to us that it had to be RTK or nothing, because if the data is going to line up, it has to not move. So if you're not familiar with RTK, that means there's a base station that makes a correction on the GPS coordinates so that when I pull into the field year after year, it's the same spot. Mm-hmm. And so our local Deere dealer actually didn't have RTK capabilities at the time, so we went with an aftermarket solution for a few years, and then when they got on board, then we made the switch back to all the Deere equipment, which has been nice to keep it all integrated. But so we've been RTK since around 2008, I think.
So what are the widths that you're operating on?
Yeah, so we kind of had to make a decision, so we've stayed with 30-foot increments. As I look at farms, there's a lot of like 8-row farms, so 20 foot, and they've got a 40-foot planter. We kind of just stuck with the 30, and it works good for us. 30-foot bean head, 30-foot planters, spraying in increments of 30 feet. And also, so we purchased another planter for this year, and kind of had to sit there and think, we want to do 30 foot, 40 foot, and we decided just to stick with 30. And my thought is that it fits our operation size well now. If it was to be significantly larger someday or whatever, I think I would just jump to 60 rather than, because there's kind of like it's 30 foot or 40 foot, and 40 foot's just kind of an odd, 40, 80, 120, but so we're sticking with 30, 60, 90. So, yeah.
Have you noticed any benefits yet so far?
I've done some tests. So with a 6-row corn head, I could shell with a 30-foot planter. I could shell that is like the perfect test of harvesting your tractor tire swath, so to speak. Because with duals, you're basically 6 rows are somewhat kind of pinch rows. So I would shell, I've done this on multiple fields, but I'll shell right where the tractor drove, and then 6 rows where the wings were. So in other words, it's never been ran over. And the biggest difference I found was 8 bushel, and which is pretty significant, So when you think about your implement widths, that's another reason to go bigger, so you have more wing width. But also to me, it's it's a proof that controlled traffic works. So some of those spots, like in corn, it would be ran over when we planted, when we side dressed, every other pass or every third pass, maybe when you spray, kind of thing, and then of course harvesting. But I think, and that depends on the year, how wet the spring is, and but I've seen it's always been a measurable amount. You can pick up a couple bushel pretty much anytime you check it. So that's one thing that's been important. But
so you mentioned doing tests, and that's something that you guys have really gotten into, is research all across the farm. Yeah. We've had Sam on here a couple times talking about some of that research that you do with him in the extension office. So what's really inspired you? What's your goals there?
So for us, I like to say that we harvest 2 things from every acre. Of course, a bushel, hopefully a profit, but also some knowledge, right? Yeah. So we're not out there just to get the bushels, but we're out there to learn something so we're not making stupid mistakes again next year. And so that's, way back. I mean, even before we had the computer in the tractor and we were recording what we planted or what we were doing at the time, we were sticking flags out. And my dad still does some, he's like, well, what if we lose this data? We won't know what's out here. It's like, well, I think we can trust this stuff nowadays. But, so we're all the time. We're putting flags out and marking. So way back, we were marking varieties. So even when we weren't doing so much stuff with Ohio State, we're just kind of starting out we would just be splitting the planter. So one half with one variety, one half with another variety. And what we've kind of done along that line is we'll pick one variety that's worked well for our farm like the previous year, and maybe that'll be on like, say, half our acres, and then the other half is something new that we're trying. So, and then we'll just kind of divide that out. Of course, within reason, we might pick one that's, so match up maturities or whatever. But if I do get a field where I have like the same variety across the whole planter, then I'm just like, I'm always trying something. So I'll go back and I'll make a down pressure change or, just something and make a note. We were making notes back then. Now I type it in the computer what I'm doing. But yeah, so everything from varieties to different fertilizer rates and populations, and then now with what we've done with work with Ohio State, over the last few years they've been working on like rewriting the tri-state fertilizer guide and recommendations for that. So we've done a lot of stuff with that, and I guess I could talk about. I was thinking about a couple things that sometimes when you do research you realize that maybe you need to change something. Other times you realize that what you're doing is justified or right. So like with Sam, we've done corn population for multiple years and soybean population for multiple years. And the corn population has been one that we've kind of found that maybe we're doing it right. The kind of that sweet spot, 32, 33, 34,000 seems to work pretty well. Of course, it depends a little bit on the hybrid in the field, but so we've just kind of stuck. That's what we were doing, and we've stuck with it. But soybean population, the first year we did that with Sam, we had a 60 or 80,000 population strip, and Sam's like, well, it has to be at least 500 feet long. And Dad's like, well, do we really have to do 500 feet? That won't work, And so that's been kind of interesting to see because it actually does work pretty well. So, seeing soybean populations drop and but also within reason, somewhat it has to be by variety and by field, by conditions. So like, 2019, we're planting in way too wet conditions in June, and it's like we're not dropping these populations.
Yeah.
We're upping them. We planted populations like we planted 10 years ago because we got to get these things canopied. We got to capture sunlight. So you can't just go by. You got to take other things into account. But yeah.
Yeah, but that's all part of the experience.
Right.
You gain that experience and can make those decisions.
Right.
But at least you have that in your pocket for the
right.
really good years.
So as a farmer, do you really know what 60,000 population soybeans look like?
Yeah.
And in 2018, they looked really good. They were thick, and we planted a mile-long field all the way across, and they were our best return on investment, So.
Yeah, in 2019, I think some farmers got to find out what
they looked like
unintentionally.
Yes, yeah.
It was definitely a challenging year.
Oh yes, one that we're glad is over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the other things we wanted to talk to you about was, the philosophy that your family takes on transitioning the farm over to the next generation. Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a lot of talk about that kind of thing in the industry right now, and lots of meetings are held. And I think a lot of it has to do with the average age of the farmer. It's like a major concern in the industry. But I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. Probably every operation's different. But one thing my dad has always used as a motto, or been adamant about, however you want to say it, is that your kids need to do the fun jobs, and they need to get to do the things that are fun. So the first year my dad was running our operation, he's like, get in the combine. And I'm like 12, 13 years old, and I'm flying around in the combine. Like, it was great, and so it made it fun for me. And I see a lot of farms where I think they make that mistake that they don't let their kids do anything but the grunt work. And of course they're not interested in it. And I think that's the key is, they got to be interested in it if they want to learn about it. They're like, well, my kids don't really know enough about it. And it's like, well, you probably didn't teach them or give them the opportunity to want to learn it, So like for me, I was playing basketball in 6th grade, and I'm not necessarily good at basketball. I was just tall. And so they had me on like the traveling team or whatever. And we had gotten some chicken manure spread, and we were incorporating that. And I'm out there, I'm just all excited because it's time to work the ground, and because we're no-till, I don't get to do that much, right? So I'm out in the tractor, and Mom comes out one night, and she's like, you got to go to basketball practice. You need to come in. I'm like, I'm not getting out of the tractor. I got to finish this field. And she's like, no, you have to go to practice. I was like, well, I quit. So she's like, well, you have to go tonight because you have to tell your coach if you quit. So I went, and I told him. And, that was the end of basketball. Yeah. So I wasn't going to the NBA, and I knew I was going to be a farmer. So, yeah.
No, that's a good point, that I think it's a balance, or you got to give them the hard jobs so they learn good work ethic, but give them a little taste.
Yeah, they can't just do everything fun. But I mean, if they're getting to drive the combine when they're 12 years old, or getting to plant some corn, a lot of dads kind of hold on to that job and let them take a turn at it. Planting corn's not that hard. So.
And we mentioned not quite as light of a topic, but if something does happen to someone on the farm and they've been the only one who's done that job, then that makes it really hard to pick up and carry on.
Right.
So
everyone should know how to do everything, really.
Yeah. It's great. Well, we really appreciate your time. I think you provided a lot of good insight and fun interview here. So
good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Good luck with 2020.
All right. Thanks. We might need it.
Thanks for listening to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next episode.